Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a Ukraine war military aid live stream news update, and I'm probably ill-advised to be doing this. A, it's late at night. B, it's been like a big something birthday weekend for my missus. We had a big function room booked last night and loads of people, great times. Very late night, worse for wear all today. Beautiful summer's day in spring, global warming or something. Incredibly good weather we've had in the UK for the last, there's been no rain for 6 weeks and it's just been stunning. And that is conducive to sitting in the garden and then continuing last night's festivities. And we've got this 12-foot sort of best way pool that the boys, we erect every summer, and the boys go crazy in there, and we have family round, and just been a big day of continuing last night's festivities, as I say. And this is not a good idea that I'm going to now sit here and speak to you half cut. I have found that I've got a bit of withdrawal symptoms from not speaking to you guys recently, because I do really enjoy these times, and also I've got lists that are insanely long. Now I'm doing a military aid update tonight, but I really should be doing a geopolitics update and an American politics update. I've got just a gazillion links to share with you, but alas, we're going to do military aid because actually it's probably easier for me to get my head around, and it's probably less ranty. I'd probably rant to you a little too much. So I thought, having just seen off the best part of a bottle of Prosecco with the missus, she's now retreated. Her ribs are hurting, and she's had a pretty heavy weekend. So thanks to Mark from the Little Whiskey Shop. Not thanks to him. I mean, thank you for providing it. I put an order into him because he's a legend, and I drove out to Ukraine with him, literally in the vehicle with him. And that was that red L200, I think it was, Mitsubishi L200. That unfortunately, that was one that ended up going to Rick the Ukrainian, and we drove that out, but it was his vehicle. The unit, I think there's a guy called Mongol that took it on, and unfortunately that vehicle is now no longer, or at least it might have been recovered, and they might be fixing it up, or I don't know what the eventual outcome for the vehicle was, but it was certainly hit by drones and was looking a little bit worse where last time I saw it. But anyway, I drove out with Mark, with a bunch of us. So it was like seven of us went out, 8 of us, 7 drivers, 8 people. And sorry, struggling when you've got multiple sclerosis and you can't feel your fingers. So I really struggle to do the simplest of things, stuff that you guys take for granted. Honestly, I can't even change a remote control without the channel on a remote control without looking at what I'm doing, because I can't feel the buttons. So I can't DIY is really difficult for me. So MS sucks. Can I just say that publicly? It sucks. Anyway, what is not a negative thing in my life is Mark from Little Whiskey Shop, and he has this little side hustle of having like a shop that sells whiskey. I'm not a big whiskey drinker, but here I have some white port. Right, I'm a little bit vulnerable to a bit of port. Right, I like a bit of port, and this white port, and then Martha's White Port, produced in Portugal, Port of Leith Cask Partners, is absolutely delightful. So I got a bottle of this off him previously, and it didn't last too long. And it's this beautiful kind of rose-coloured, orangey sort of, lovely looking port. But of course, it's not like a dark red port that you normally get, because it's a white port, except it's not exactly white. Anyway, I'm going to enjoy that with you. I'm sorry if that's going to cause me to have issues with making much sense, but hey ho, we'll go for it. Okay, so I've not been paying attention to you guys. So what have you been saying? Okay. Yeah, there's no advance notice for this, by the way. I just decided to do this last minute. but that's the way I roll, and you guys should know that by now. So when some of you complain that I didn't get any notifications for this, it's because the internet didn't know I was going to do it. I didn't know I was going to do it until I was like, oh yeah, okay, we're doing it. Right. First thing I want to say, first thing he says, having spoken for 5 minutes and 25 seconds. First thing I want to say is that I have a video interview with the Kiev Post. Now, interesting things with this. First of all, they chose a rather bizarre title and a thumbnail that I actually disagree with. Like, I didn't say this, and it's a little bit controversial because then all the trolls jump on and say, doesn't know what he's talking about. Well, actually listen to the video because I don't say that. And what I say is perfectly reasonable right throughout the interview. And it was absolutely perfectly fine interview. I just offload my brain as I want to do. But here it's like Russia on the back foot, Ukraine's war machine. In fact, what's interesting, well, I'll finish that title in a second. The thumbnail, they've taken my picture off it. I don't know what's happened. I don't know whether I'm a bit controversial or something, but my picture was on there, and Russia is losing ground. Ukraine's artillery is surging, and they have changed the thumbnail a bit. But I didn't say that Russia is losing ground in this interview. So that was a little bit frustrating. Russia on the back foot, Ukraine's war machine accelerates. Now, I did talk about the war machine accelerating in terms of production, and interestingly, that's apropos to what we're going to talk about tonight. But I don't know whether it's an attempt to sort of be a bit more clickbaity and get more viewership in. But as I've said to you before, the thread on this video is a mix of you guys who are really supportive of what I do and say, and loads of Russian trolls going, he doesn't know what he's talking about. But actually, you would think that if you didn't watch the video. But if you watch the video, I don't say that. And actually, I do know what I'm talking about, I think. And actually, I say nothing particularly controversial. In fact, I say all the normal stuff that you've heard me say a million times. But anyway, there's a 20-25 minute interview where it's got quite a few views, and I think I do all right. But it's just an interesting choice of the first thumbnail, which they've now changed, and the idea that I've said that they're losing ground, which I didn't really say. So anyway, I thought I'd set that straight. But what would be great is if you do watch that. If you haven't, I know loads of you have watched that and put some really, really generous comments on there. So thank you for your support. It means an awful lot. It means the world. But if you haven't watched it, please do, and click like and put your comment in there, because actually it might alert them to get me on in the future. And I love to get that kind of coverage to get onto these big platforms and say my piece. Anyway, let's now go to the military. Interesting, losing ground geopolitically, and there is a sense of that. I mean, goodness me, God, losing ground geopolitically. I mean, the whole peace negotiation, absolute fustercluck, is just endlessly fascinating in a really frustrating way, because, like you guys know, I'll say the whole world seems to be beholden to what Trump does and says, and we are now in a situation where, and we can talk about this in the Q&A afterwards, but we're in a situation where there are some claims that ceasefire is not going to take place till October, and if there are no ramifications on Russia until October from the United States, and that is absolutely disgraceful. Now, I know there are claims that Friedrich Merz and Europeans could well be putting sanctions on Russia on Tuesday. That would be really good if that happens, and if they diverge from the United States and go, forge their own path, then more strength to Europe for doing that, and it's long overdue. But anyway. And yes, John, stop it. I'm trying to start. So losing ground financially, and Ukrainian hryvnia is gaining on the ruble. Yeah. As someone says, ask Jason J. Smart about the title. I guess it was just to draw in the crowd. I have actually, but he doesn't actually. The video gets sent off to Kiev Post, and they do that all. So he doesn't have the say over how that goes. Okay, right. So we're going to start with the report that Ukraine is to receive $84 million from the World Bank to restore homes damaged in Russia's war. Ukraine will receive $84 million from the World Bank to restore housing damaged, according to the Finance Ministry, announced on May the 15th. And I often think on a daily basis of the amount of money. I mean, you think 84 million, that's really good. That's excellent. They need that money. You always wonder with the World Bank whether that's, a loan and what are the strings attached to that, etc., etc. But I just think all the damage that takes place on a daily basis, 84 million is actually a drop in the ocean, isn't it? It's an awful lot of money. It's a crazy amount of money. But I wonder what the daily damage in terms of to housing, just to civilian infrastructure, in terms of guided glide bombs like your FAB, your car bombs. Then you've got obviously FPV drones and those kind of smaller drones, and then you've got the medium range drones like your Lancets and whatnot when they're hitting like buildings and things. And then you've got your Shahed drones, and you've got your cruise missiles, and you've got your hypersonic and other ballistic missiles. You add all of these things up, and then just artillery and tanks and mortars and the front line and the destruction of towns and villages. I know they put a reconstruction. They put a number on the amount of money it'll cost to reconstruct Ukraine. It's phenomenal, hundreds of billions of dollars. But 84 million is absolutely great. But goodness me, I wonder how many days worth of damage that equates to. Right. Okay. So there is some good news about different aid bills coming in, and I think this is fantastic and long overdue from Italy as well. So really good news to hear that. According to multiple Italian media outlets, Italy is preparing its 11th military aid package to Ukraine, which reportedly will include 400 M113 armored personnel carriers. Now, these are getting replaced in Italy by a vehicle that they're producing themselves. So these M113s, they're old, right? They've been around since Vietnam War and before. But Ukraine can upgrade them. I've seen a United 24 video where they put their own automated turret on top, or they can just use them as is. They can often use them as medevacs and whatnot. So really useful, albeit old, pieces of kit. And to get 400 of them is fantastic, because although they'd be given 600 by the US, I think, and then more from other countries, so they've got a whole bank of M113s. They do also get attrited really, really regularly, and that's because they use them a lot. In fact, it's interesting that they are often engaged in frontline assaults when the Ukrainians are doing assaults, or in certainly with activity on the front line. And you think, they've got all of these different vehicles that they're being given, but it shows that actually they really need just loads and loads of mobility vehicles, because they are using things like the M113 quite centrally, I think, in some of the work they're doing. So another 400 is going to be super useful, because the attrition of these must be pretty high. Another SAMP-T air defense system. So these are capable of taking down ballistic missiles. The only other system we know that can definitely do that is the PAC-3 variant of the Patriot surface-to-air missile system. So they've got 2 SAMP-Ts, and another one on the way would be absolutely brilliant, and additional ammunition and supplies. Now, this is the 11th package from Italy. It's just really interesting. If you go and look at something like Denmark readies its 26th military aid package, and then you hear Poland is preparing its 47th military aid package. So there's a lot of people saying Italy, huge economy comparatively in the world, huge military industrial base and armed force capabilities, but actually hasn't matched the rhetoric with the kit. So that is fantastic. Let's go and see, as many people say, M113 is better than nothing. Oh, sorry, that was not what I was supposed to say. These comments move so quickly. It's better than nothing. Then we have let them have Bradley for F8. Someone's saying M113 is horribly outdated. Yeah, but they're still actually really useful, and they can improve them to some degree. But yeah, imagine 400 Bradleys. Yes. No, there was one other one. Here it is. Ukraine have formed mobility units with just dozens of M113s, and they get moved to areas where they plan for an offense and attach to an infantry unit for transport. They push, drop off, and then shoot off. And then, yeah, as he continues here, and then when the fight stops, they realign, they detach and sent to another area. Yeah. So, you know, I think, Scruffy Tails. Really good to have you on board here, mate. I've been watching a number of your frontline videos and they are really good. People should go and subscribe to Scruffy Tales. Really, really good. I was putting up the washing today and listening to your video on Tourette's and Prokrovsk. So really should check out his stuff. It's absolutely fabulous. 400 M113s are better than 400 Larders. Yes. They are more than capable in transporting troops. Yes. And medevacing casualties. Yes. And that's my point. And they need armored vehicles to support assault. So yeah, Bradleys would be great. Of course they would, but they're not getting Bradleys at the moment. The US are not on board with that kind of assistance. So yeah, M113s is I think still, you know, good. Certainly better than Larders, as he said. Now, Italy is ramping up support for Ukraine, pulling 400 M113 armored vehicles out of storage and including them in its 11th military aid package. The M113s have been phased out and to be replaced by Dardo IFVs, which are made by I can't remember now. I know it's not listed there, but yes. So that's really good news that they're going to get that. And I've actually seen a few other things possibly added. There was some satellite. I might have to check that out as we're speaking a bit later, because there is some other stuff that Italy is going to be giving as well. I think that is going to be useful for the Ukrainians. So fingers crossed that'll be a decent enough package. We're in it. Denmark's readying its 26th military package for Ukraine. With diplomacy ongoing, the country's leaders pledge to maintain pressure if Russia resists efforts to end hostilities. Obviously, Denmark are just absolutely wonderful in their support for Ukraine. So, yeah. So yeah, just tuning in while the kids watch ESC. Humbled. Yeah, no, you're absolutely great. And mate, if you ever want to come on and chat on a live and talk about what's going on the front line, just let me know and we'll hook up and I'll big up your channel, because it absolutely deserves it. Every subscriber. As part of an annual aid package, Belgium will transfer 20 Serber air defense systems. Now, I don't know what the Serber air defense system is. I just saw this today, so that's really interesting. About 100 trucks and 5 unmanned sea vessels to Ukraine. In the autumn, developments were underway to create mobile air defense systems for shooting down drones. This is probably what they're talking about. So I don't know if it's worth me just doing Serber air defense Belgium. Let's see what that comes up with. Yeah, I don't know. Serb Air. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's man pads. It could be a man pad, so a man portable air defense system. I don't know if anyone has any more information on what they are. 20 Serber air defense systems. I mean, 20 doesn't sound like an awful lot if they are just man pads, but again, better than nothing. Belgium, interestingly, has a pretty sizable defense military industrial complex there. They do have quite a few defense concerns, and there were some criticisms for Belgium, well, actually right throughout the war, for not doing enough, even though they could. So yeah. Belgium-based defense firm Cockerill will deliver its Leopard 1A5 BE-C3105 testbed to Ukraine for trials with the Ukrainian military. The C3105 turret has already seen commercial success being used on both the Haramau and Zorawar light tanks, and it will likely be offered here as an option for a deeper modernization of Ukraine's Leopard 1 fleet. There's lots of talk about the Leopard 1s in Switzerland that are still there, 96 of them, owned by a company there that wants to get rid of them, but there are issues with sending them to Ukraine. So there are theories that they could go to Greece, and Greece could provide their own Leopard 1A5s to Ukraine. So anyway, I don't know the what the ramifications of this particular claim is, though. Okay, moving on. Poland preparing their 47th military aid package, which is, like I said, before, when you're talking about Italy with their 11th, their 47th here is pretty incredible. So yeah, 47th aid package worth $200 million, according to the head of the Polish embassy in Ukraine. Yeah, as someone says, John, interview Scruffy, do a frontline live with Scruffy. Yep. If he's cool with that, I'm always game for that kind of interaction. So just let me know. And if I miss it in the live chat, I'm just trying to check if he's answered. Just talking about the A10 at the moment. Not ideal for Ukraine, the A10 Warthog, according to the head of the Polish embassy in Ukraine. So that's really good news that Poland appear to be giving a package as well. So we've got Italy, we've got Belgium, we've got Poland. We've been through quite a bit of a lean period, I think, in terms of aid packages going. So it's really good to hear these packages coming through again. Now, staying on Poland, the head of the Polish embassy in Ukraine, Piotr Lukasiewicz, confirmed that transferring MiG-29s to Ukraine is possible, with negotiations still ongoing. So if you remember earlier on in the war, I think, well, Slovakia sent a bunch of MiGs to Ukraine, and Poland were touted as doing that, and then they didn't, or maybe they gave some. I can't quite remember, but they're still on the cards, and I think it might depend on, while Poland is phasing out MiG-29s for F-16s, the decision depends on Ukraine's readiness and need for new aircraft types. So I guess Ukraine are going to be wanting F-16s themselves, but I guess, if you can get some MiG-29s, they still do use them. They're still using guided glide bombs, the American ones on MiG-29s, I think. So they're certainly useful. Yeah, you don't want to use them to engage with Russian aircraft. They'll be completely outsmarted by them, but they still have a place, and there'll be pilots who know how to fly them. So yeah, I would have thought that negotiations still ongoing. Well, fingers crossed for that. And staying on the aircraft subject, we have Ukraine receiving all 6 promised F-16s from Norway by the end of 2025, says their defense minister. Some have already been delivered, though details remain classified for security reasons. Deliveries are proceeding on schedule. So that's good news. Of course, they lost one recently, which was a real shame. That appears to have gone down as a result of some issue on board, rather than being shot down by any kind of Russian air defense or Russian planes. So yeah, I guess that's better. You'd rather see a Ukrainian plane go down because of a malfunction, I guess, than being shot down by the Russians. But yeah, they will lose F-16s. As someone said in the thread on that day when I reported that, they are going to lose. It's bad, but it's not the end of the world, and it's to be expected. Planes do get lost. You're at war. Ukrainians will need consistent provision of all sorts of material, including very expensive planes. And we just need to hope that there are going to be more forthcoming in terms of either F-16s, or throw in some Gripens, please do, and Mirages and whatever the French can help with. And speaking of France, France will deliver, and I've told you this before, we know that all their Caesars that they're going to build this year are going to go to Ukraine. What we didn't know is quite how many there will be. Thanks, man. Scruffy Tails replying there. France will deliver 144 Caesars. The French government said it will transfer all of the 144 Caesar artillery systems to Ukraine this year. They produce 12 per month, and the entire production run for this year has been allocated. So good news, excellent. And in fact, they are using frozen Russian asset funding to sustain the provision of Caesars, to maintain those Caesars as well. So yeah, that's good news from France. Now, speaking of the French, I don't really know the news source here. I don't know the provenance of this. This is not a source I've ever particularly used before, but I just saw this on my feed. French government urges the EU to provide long-term support of Ukrainian forces. So I think the French are. I think Macron is really at the center of stuff that's going on at the moment. He seems to be all over the media when it comes to support for Ukraine. All the positive, at least rhetoric that we're hearing, and of course, there's often a difference between rhetoric and tangible material and support. But the rhetoric from Macron has been good, and I'm going to repeat myself, but I've often said there needs to be a focal single person at the heart of probably the EU, probably rather than Europe, as in rather, Keir Starmer as a British leader who is very supportive of Ukraine could be a focal point. Is he a strong enough personality? Probably not, but he could, rally support for Ukraine. But he's outside the EU, and actually, I think you need either the German leader, but that was Olaf Scholz, and at the time it's like, no, not so much Scholz. So Macron was the only person putting his hand up and being in the right position. Then they had the French elections, European elections, French elections, and it all got sidelined for him. But now he's coming back and really being strong on Ukraine. But you've also got Friedrich Merz coming out and maybe putting his hat in the ring there, putting his glove in the ring. So, it's good to see Macron certainly saying what he's saying at the moment and being visually really strong behind the Ukrainians. But of course, are the French matching their rhetoric with material? This is it. As Bobo Uzala says, Macron is taking the leadership role vacated by the USA. That was what was needed. Definitely what was needed. So, Scruffy Tales, 144 Caesars plus the previous 70. Now, I don't know if that's plus the previous 70s because I don't know if the previous 70 was still getting made this year. So there might be some overlap there. And there was something like 72 that were being built. They were being part funded by, I think Denmark were funding some, all sorts of, Ukraine were bought some themselves. I think France were funding some, and then others as well. So there's a whole mixture of who's funding these. When it comes to 144, some of those might be included in the kind of 72. But if not, there's a lot more on the cards, and I actually don't know who is paying for those Caesars, I have to say. Ukraine has lost 8 in total after 2 years, which is actually pretty good, isn't it? Although it depends how many they have been using. The criticism of the Caesar is it's quite a big vehicle, right? And this is not a small bit of kit, and it's got a bigger footprint, arguably, than say an M777 towed howitzer. And shoot and scoot is less desirable these days because the more you move, the more you are visible from drones and the more vulnerable you become. So some are saying that actually towed howitzers are finding their own place again, as they are easier to conceal. You can put them in these tree lines, and actually this time of year that's easier to do because the foliage on the trees gives you added camouflage, whereas in winter and early spring that's not quite the case. But also counter-battery fire isn't so good for the Russians, and that means that you can have a towed howitzer in situ more so than you could maybe at the beginning of the war, because actually I don't think the Russians have such good counter-battery fire in order to track where ordnance is coming from. UK and Germany are neck and neck in the Eurovision. I like it. Oh, wow. Go. I normally watch the Eurovision, but I've been out of it this weekend, so I've missed it. And God, wouldn't it be sod's law if the one time UK win is when I don't watch it? Yeah, bugger. Okay, so we're going on to some drone chat now. Ukraine battle tests a Czech AI kamikaze drones immune to Russian jamming. Now, I reported on these drones the other day, the NTS line of autonomous drones. There were 3 lines that did slightly different things. So let's find out about these. So what do you have? The unmanned aerial vehicles are reportedly equipped with AI-based navigation, enabling them to operate without GPS. So that GPS is one of the easier things to jam, without GPS, radio signals, or optical fiber. Drones with autonomous visual navigation systems on AI are, of course, being developed by other companies. Some claim to have them ready. However, no one has yet achieved to successfully use them in real deployment. We were the fastest, says this company. According to Petras, the drones' key advantage, these MTS check drones, is their immunity to jamming, as they emit and receive no signals, allowing them to function in areas saturated with electronic magnetic interference. Our drones on Ukrainian soil carry out attack missions, he added. The AI reportedly replaces human operators entirely, guiding the drone using mathematical analysis of barometric data, visual input from onboard cameras, and comparisons between offline satellite images and live video. The drones are launched from portable ramps assembled in minutes, after which they operate autonomously. Development began in early 2024 for these check drones, with the first delivery starting in autumn. The system was fully tested and integrated into Ukrainian military within 3/4 of a year, which is, astounding. I think not only are the Ukrainians developing things like super quickly due to the demands of the war and the need to be ahead of the curve when it comes to competing with Russia, they need to be innovating really quickly. But all the countries supporting Ukraine need to be innovating really quickly to keep up with or ahead of Ukraine. If they want to get their drones to Ukraine, and if MTS, as an example, let's just pick these guys, if they want Ukraine to demand their drones and therefore to sell their drones, I mean, this is in terms of business here, and it's uncomfortable sometimes talking about the military and industrial complex and business motivations and so on and so forth. But actually, that's the nature of the beast. In order for MTS to succeed in getting their kit to Ukraine, they need to have good kit, right? And in order to have good kit, they need to be learning from what's going on in Ukraine and matching all the innovations that are taking place from the Russians and the Ukrainians, and making sure that they are producing things that are useful and innovative. And here, if this is to be believed, their AI systems are, at the forefront. Development began in autumn. System was fully tested and integrated within 3/4 of a year into the Ukrainian military. Unlike American companies like Palantir, with massive teams and revenue, we accomplished this in Czech conditions with 300 employees. According to the report, Ukraine has already received more than a dozen of these AI-driven drones. LPP's current output is around 50 drones monthly, with planned increases due to growing global demand for jamming-resistant drones. The MTS drones are entirely in-house built, including explosive payloads, with models capable of delivering up to 12-kilogram warheads. Militiani notes that all three drone variants from MTS, the 05, the 25, and 40, are designed as suicide drones that detonate upon impact. A safety mechanism ensures self-destruction if the drone fails to complete its mission. So that's really good news. Good stuff. Check it there. Now, talking about another drone provided to Ukraine, and again, this is about keeping ahead of the curve. Same story, well, same kind of concept here. The Bayraktar TB2 drone was touted as the big drone of the Ukraine war in the first 6 months. Actually, there was a bit of clever PR done here, where they released footage of the drones that was predominantly taken very early in the war, and then they released it over time rather than all at once, even after the Russians had managed to adapt to the TB2 and cause some problems to the TB2. They kept releasing footage of it, so it seemed like it was kind of more long-term successful than it probably actually was. And eventually the Russians managed to be able to deal with the TB2. It's a pretty big drone. It's kind of MQ-9 Reaper type drone, so it ended up getting used more as a reconnaissance drone from a distance rather than one that was releasing these missiles onto Russian equipment. So if you remember the beginning of the war, that's big 60-kilometer stuck convoy on the way to Kiev was like, I think they hit it at the front, hit it at the back, and then it was stuck in the mud and all that kind of stuff. And it was TB2s that were doing some of those strikes. but we haven't really heard too much about it, other than occasionally seeing footage coming from, say, the Black Sea of TB2s being used as reconnaissance drones. So Russia jammed Turkey's famous drone in Ukraine. Now Bayraktar is back again with AI. So this goes back to that Czech drone, which is, I think we're going to be seeing a lot of race to get AI functional and bringing results in for the Ukrainians. And here we've got Turkey's Bayraktar doing that. After losing its edge in Ukraine, Baykar's drones, so Baykar's manufacturer, in fact, it's Erdogan, the kind of, I would say, dictator, of the leader of Turkey. It's his son-in-law that owns Baykar, and that's possibly why we're also seeing fairly consistent pro-Ukraine rhetoric from Turkey, even though they kind of straddle the fence with Russia and Ukraine. There is definitely a vested interest in Erdogan's who support Ukraine, because his son-in-law's company Baykar is doing all sorts of things in the military domain. You see some of the stuff they're developing, like I think autonomous like fighter jets, effectively, and yeah. Anyway, their drone has got an AI-powered comeback, so we might be seeing more of the future. What else do we have? German startup Stark has unveiled the OEWEV Virtus kamikaze drone, designed with combat experience from Ukraine in mind. It features vertical takeoff and landing, autonomous targeting. So again, so if it's not AI, then it's autonomous targeting. So yeah, we're starting to move away from having to have humans find targets, spot them, and then I guess lock in and do all that stuff manually. A range of up to 100 kilometers, speeds of up to 250 kilometers an hour, 5-kilogram payload, and can operate without a connection. So not a bad payload, I guess, depending on what the size of the drone is. I mean, it's not the biggest payload, but it doesn't look like the biggest drone. So so there you go. That's the situation there. So lots of drones, really looking to develop the AI and autonomous skills. Team up with Lockheed, but just a few more details is key. More some under license of not wanting to rely on the US in terms of, if you're making something under license, okay, it's a US piece of kit initially, but it kind of does distance. Then if you're making it under license in Europe, for them to be used, the manufactured Patriot missiles. Anyway, plans include also ATACMS, Gimlers, so stuff for HIMARS, Hellfire, JAGM, PAC-3, so Patriot missiles. Production could hit 10,000 units a year by 2027, so that's not too far away. Yeah, really good news for Ukraine, I think that would be. And now looking at Ukraine's own innovation, we are going to Russians are jamming the stream. Are you having issues with trolls on the thread? Anyway, Ukraine's full-time robotics unveiled the Slim Beam laser turret, 1.5 kilowatts, to neutralize drones up to 1 kilometer. So again, we are seeing the first we heard was that the UK were producing target at 10p or whatever it was to fire it. Really, really low, high tech but low cost, which is a good. That's definitely the best of the combinations there. And Yeah, so you are hitting a target with a laser, something like a drone, but of course that's pretty close, 1 kilometer. So it's, trying to get above that 1 kilometer, I think is super important. But we've seen Ukraine apparently produce their own lasers, and this could be the one or another one. We heard that they've had success with using lasers previously, but it could have been taking the kind of UK laser and working with it. We also are hearing like North Korea, the US, both have released footage of their own laser capabilities as well. Specifications are 1080 nm wavelength, 20 to 800 meters range. So actually, not even quite a kilometer there. 30-minute runtime, 50-kilogram weight, can blind drones at 2 kilometers. So actually, capabilities above that 800-meter range. So that is also a really small bit of kit that's in the boot of a car. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. So hopefully the Ukrainians are ahead of the game with that. So that sector on this. Let's just dip into it a little bit. According to Brave One, the Slim Beam laser turret is a dual-use system that can be utilized to, quote, destroy drones or blind optical systems, neutralize explosives, or clear power lines of obstructions, remove icicles, or eliminate other potentially hazardous objects. Wow. So, it can just melt stuff, I guess, or burn things that are just sitting on a power line. Slim Beam is designed to neutralize drones and other airborne threats at a range of up to 1 kilometer. It offers both autonomous operation and remote control through a web application, allowing safe use without exposing personnel. The turret can be integrated into mobile platforms or used as a stationary system for guarding critical infrastructure and strategic sites. According to the declared specifications, Slim Beam can disable small drones at 800 meters and blind drone cameras at distances reaching 2 kilometers. And there you can see it loaded onto a mobile platform. For mine clearance. Wow. Or detonate explosives. This is a pretty interesting application for this. We're ready to develop more powerful lasers that operate at longer distances, but scaling is needed for that. Slim Beam is one of the 4 products the company currently offers. These include the LR1000 laser rifle, the SB Bot autonomous platform and integrated turret, and laser collimators, and also focus for B2B markets. I don't even know what any of that means, but it appears that we're very close to the Terminator. The system operates for 30 minutes per cycle and has a laser power of 1,500 watts, which is like half a kettle, at a wavelength of 1080 nm. It weighs 50 kilograms and measures 55 by 52 by 67 centimeters, so pretty small. Not Ukraine's first combat laser system. So, yeah, that's what I was saying. In April, this is what I reported. The Forces of Unmanned Systems demonstrated the capabilities of another domestic laser complex, the Trizob. So that's what I was referring to earlier. And talking about laser rifles, and I just thought I'd throw this one in. It's not linked to Ukraine, although Euromide Press says Ukrainian infantry could use this. They're kind of relating it to Ukraine. But this is France's new laser rifle, silently melts electronics at 500 meters, and Ukrainian infantry could really use it. Built for stealth and sabotage, the Helmet LP laser gun disables tech targets at range. So essentially, that looks just like this, but slightly less powerful and therefore used as a rifle rather than, you're not going to be easily carrying this around, but then that has twice the range. This laser rifle has a 500-meter range. I mean, goodness me, this is just, we are living in the future. I know that makes no sense, but we are living in the future. Yes. So anyway, yes, is there a bit of Wi-Fi issue? Oh dear, I do apologize. Let's see if there is. What has happened to my Wi-Fi? It has lost power or something. I've got a hub here. Appears to have been turned off. There we go. Sorry about that. My hub had been turned off by, no doubt, one of my children being annoying. Okay, the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine has unveiled the AI technology Avengers. I did report this the other day, which detects enemy targets in just 2.2 seconds. This AI is already integrated into the VESA streaming module of the Delta combat system and can automatically identify up to 70% of enemy equipment in video feeds. So that I reported on this the other day, as I say, and I- I'm not fully sure of what's going on with this, other than it looks like it is something appended to the Delta system. So the Delta system is the platform that they use in like command centers and hubs to be able to manage the front lines and schedule drone attacks and communicate between units. And it's modular, so you can have these add-ons, and it's designed to be able to put these add-ons in to increase the functionality depending on what you're needing from Delta. And here we've got an AI add-on that can detect enemy targets from this is how I understand it. So the feeds they're getting in, and when you see these big drone hubs, you've got these banks of monitors where you've got feeds coming in from these drones all over the front line, all over the local area of the front line. I guess what this does is it analyzes those feeds and finds targets where the human eye you're either not looking, or you're focusing on something else or whatever, and it can find those targets for you automatically. And 70% of enemy equipment in video feeds can be automatically identified, it says here. So that's really, really impressive there. Okay, sorry if there was some poor connection there, and my pausing was not on purpose, but hopefully we'll have better connection now as my hub is fully working. I can't believe that. The Ukrainian National Guard has unveiled its upgraded MLRS multiple launch rocket system mounted on a Humvee chassis, armed with 6 122mm rockets and a range of up to 40 kilometers. The system features digital fire control, drone integration, electronic warfare protection, and electric targeting. So this is fantastic. And actually, do you know what? Like, so those are tubes loaded on to Humvee, and it all looks rather, well constructed. But we've raised money for Car for Ukraine, and 2 vehicles now that ATP Geopolitics, the channel here, you guys have raised money for, have gone to the front line with these multiple launch rocket tubes on the back of like an L200, GL200. And although it might not be as all singing, all dancing as this may be, they are, by all accounts, really decent bits of kit. So, this kind of innovation is, I think, really important. I wonder whether it gives Ukraine the edge. I wonder how much Russian innovation there is along the lines of what we're seeing with the Ukrainians. I hope that there is that competitive advantage for the Ukrainians there. In fact, speaking of, I'm going to move this forward because it's kind of relevant to what I was just saying. But speaking of Car for Ukraine and raising funds for buying trucks, as we've done here, in terms of NAFO, Car for Ukraine, and the Snatch Land Rovers, Ukrainians have imported over 100,000 pickup trucks from Europe for the needs of the Ukrainian armed forces, according to Politico. The Ukrainian military is increasingly relying on civilian pickup trucks. The most popular are Toyota Hiluxes and a discontinued Nissan Navara, and especially the Mitsubishi L200. So yeah, that's absolutely incredible. Like 100,000 pickup trucks, just in insane numbers. Now, a Russian modified Yak-52 light engine aircraft, which is planned to be used to shoot down Ukrainian long-range drones. Actually, that's in the wrong section. I'll come to that a bit later. The Ukrainians use that themselves. We'll put that in the Russian section. Had it in the wrong section. Sorry. We'll just finish what Ukraine is doing. Ukraine's Ruta missile drone will get an electronic warfare immune navigation system, says Defense Express. So I'm not aware of the Ruta missile drone. Let's learn about it. So it's essentially a miniature cruise missile. Now, we saw the Russians, I reported the Russians having this called the Banderol, and it was loaded on one of their Orion drones. The Orion drones is a bit like the Bayraktar TB2 we just seen, the MQ-9 Reaper drone from the Americans, is that kind of size drone. And the Russian version, the Orion, has been seen to be carrying, in some footage, a compact cruise missile, and called the S800 or the S8000. I'm not sure. I've seen it stated as both. I'm not sure which one it is. I think it's S8000. Here is a Ukrainian equivalent. The Destinus Ruta, essentially a miniature cruise missile, but often called a missile drone, will receive a new navigation system enabling high-precision strikes in contested environments with denied access to GPS and other means of satellite navigation, in particular due to the enemy electronic warfare countermeasures. So there you go. That's good news, but I was not aware of this missile at all, and I don't know whether it's used in any great numbers, because you would assume that if it was, we'd know more about it. I would have heard about it previously. So it's worth noting that the Ukraine's use of the Ruta missile drone was disclosed in late 2024. At that time, it was undergoing tests. So it's only this year that it's come into usage, I guess. Officially. Later, Destinus reported on the delivery of another of its products, the propeller-driven Lord drone, with a strike range of 750 to 2,000 kilometers to the Ukrainian Defense Forces. The Ruta mini cruise missile, according to the announced specifications, has an operational range of 300 kilometers. The warhead weight or general payload capacity are not revealed, but analysts assume it may well be in a range of tens up to 100 kilograms. So yeah, I am waiting to see these kind of there's so many different ones, Trambita, the Ruta, these kind of missile drones that have been touted, and of course we hear about the Neptune missile, the long Neptune. But I'm just waiting to hear more about these being used, because I'm expecting scaled production and therefore scaled use of exactly what they need, which is weapons to strike in that kind of 100 to 1,000 kilometer range, but just an absolute ton of these things. Ukraine really need to be throwing these at all the Russian air bases and oil refineries that they can poke a hairy stick at. Right now, sad news for the Ukrainians here, that we hear that Ukraine lost $770 million on fake arms contracts, according to Financial Times. This was earlier in the war. Advance payments were sent to foreign intermediaries, but no weapons were delivered in these instances where they kind of lost money, amounting to a major hit to the 6 to 8 billion annual defense budget. In 2022, some deals involved 120 mil mortars from Sudan via middlemen linked to Russia. In other words, when they're scrabbling around, particularly, I guess this was more prevalent earlier in the war. They're probably a lot more careful now. They were trying to get stuff from all over the shop, and that when you're desperate, you are a bit more carefree, and because you need these things to work for you, and you can be taken advantage of, and it could well be that they were played off against the Russians, and the Russians maybe gazumped them or whatever, or they took money from. They gave money to unsavory characters trying to get arms from here, there, and everywhere, and those unsavory characters were indeed unsavory. So yeah, hopefully they've learned from that, though. Okay, now moving on to the last one for the Ukrainians here. I need a drink. US is to begin talks on troop reduction. So actually, this isn't to do with the Ukrainians. This is just a random thing I've appended on the end here because it's kind of relevant to European security. US is to begin talks on troop reduction, something we'd heard about, we've heard rumors of, in Europe later this year. America's NATO envoy says, quote, "It's more than 30 years of US desire to reduce troops in Europe. President Trump just said, enough, this is going to happen, and it's going to happen now," said the US ambassador to NATO, Matthew Whitaker. It's true, this is something Americans have been kind of thinking of. It was the Ukraine war, though, that then got Americans to actually send more troops back to Europe, if I remember correctly. So they were kind of scaling back anyway. Then they're throwing more into Europe. And now the US's position appears to be aligned with Russia, at least as far as the center of the White House is concerned. I guess they're like less worried about troops in Ukraine. Anyway, Now on to a couple of Russian bits and pieces. Not too much today, though. Oh, it's so smooth. It's so delightful, that white port. I don't know that. I think I'm just going to stick on white port now. It's that good. A Russian modified Yak-52 light engine aircraft, one that we've seen the Ukrainians operate around Odessa with. It's a two-man aircraft, and the guy out the back has a shotgun with, I think, a wide burst cartridge, and they go looking for reconnaissance drones, predominantly reconnaissance drones. I guess they can try and take out Shaheds. I don't know if they've been used to take out Shaheds, so they probably have been, actually. You'd probably need something a little bit stronger than a shotgun, though, maybe for a Shahed drone. But certainly with reconnaissance drones and Lancets and whatnot, these Yak-52s being used by the Ukrainians. Now we're hearing that a Russian modified Yak-52 light engine aircraft has been planned to be used to shoot down Ukrainian long-range drones. So, what you can do, I can do better type thing. Whenever you see one side use something, you can guarantee that the other side is going to use it fairly soon afterwards, although this has been some time between when we first saw the Ukrainians use these aircraft and now. Previously, the Ukrainian Air Force, as it says here, successfully began using this, effectively shooting down reconnaissance drones. And let's just have a little look at the Yak-52. This is an old plane. I mean, really old plane, but at the end of the day, and there you can see the gun. So less so from a guy in a cockpit, more machine gun underneath the wing there. But it's using what you can to achieve the goals that you need. Now, the last thing I'm going to go through before we have some Q&A chats and whatnot. Yeah, so just Scruffy Tales adds to this. Actually, I didn't really concentrate on why you would need the troops in Europe, American troops in Europe. He says the reason for having troops in Europe is not to have to send them over during a war, but to have them in place. By removing them, it sort of sends a message, doesn't it? Yes, it does. I think the message is very loud and clear from the Americans, which is, you guys are on your own. You sort out your own problems. And I'm going to okay. Let's sidebar this. Let's talk a little bit about NATO troops before we talk about Shaheds. That's a really important conversation to have there. I've said this to you many times before, but I am going to say it again. This whole Europe needs to pick up more of the tab for security in Europe is both true. It does need to happen. Like Europe have paid less into their defenses as a percentage of their GDP for a long time, and there are certain nations that are really a long way behind, and that needs to improve. But at the same time, like this idea that Trump has that if you're not paying enough for your defense, you therefore kind of owe the US is so that needs to be debunked. That's just rubbish. Like the US aren't picking up the tab for Portugal not having a big enough armed forces. In that very direct sense, it's like it's not like a pizza where you order a pizza and you go, right, I've ordered a pizza, we're all eating this pizza, right? I'm putting in a $5. What are you putting in? What are you putting in? It's like, if you don't put that in, then I have to spend that money myself on this pizza. Doesn't quite work out. It's not quite what goes on with it. Just means that Portugal haven't paid enough for their armed forces, which means that if a war eventually takes place where the Portuguese army is needed, then they're not going to be in as good a position to defend the Portuguese interests as they should be, right? That's a kind of main issue. Now we can talk about, okay, but then the US has to have more troops around Europe because there aren't enough Portuguese troops or whatever. I'm using Portugal as just a random example here. Not quite so random, but the issue I have with how I see this misinterpreted is that, yes, the US has for a long time been saying Europe needs to pay more, but the US gets a return on their investment. So their investment in international security is something they export. I always say, go and watch a video by Perun. Right earlier on in the war, he did a video on NATO expenditure, or expenditure on defense as a qualifier for NATO. And and exporting security, and how the US exports security and they get a return on investment for that. Like, if the more the US pushes Europe to spend more themselves, the less reliant Europe becomes on the US. And the US actually benefits from Europe being reliant, depending on the US. If you have people depending on you, you can control them. It's a bit like your children, right? They are your dependents. So you legally they are your dependents, but you get to parent them then, and you get to tell them, actually, you're going to school today, and you're going to do this, and can you empty the dishwasher, and all that kind of stuff. They are you get to control them, right? So, like, when Europe is dependent on the US gets to control Europe and use Europe to its own ends, and it can put its troops into Europe because it has its vision about what the world should be like, and it's driving that vision into reality. Now, the more you push Europe away and say you need to spend more on your defense, the more Europe will spend that money on their own defense companies as well. As we are seeing now, the EU's come out with a defense strategy that says we're going to spend 65% of our defense expenditure on European companies, and we're going to try and move away. Now that Trump's in, everyone's going, oh, let's move away from reliance on the US. Then the USA loses out economically in terms of the reliance on defense tech from the US, but also in terms of strategy, vision, command and control, and getting to dictate what the US wants to happen around the world. Like, you push Europe away, Europe stand on their own 2 feet. Okay, they're now paying more for their defense, but you, the US, don't get to say what Europe does anymore. And you become a smaller player on the world stage. What you are doing in demanding that Europe pays more is you are handing over power to Europe. Now, that's cool if you're cool with that. So on the one hand, there are isolationists who are like, yeah, we don't need to be involved in global geopolitics as much as we used to, and Europe needs to pick up the tab, and Europe needs to stand up and do more. Okay, fair enough. If you are not a globalist and if you're an isolationist, then that is fine. But just understand that with that comes less global power for the US, and therefore less ability to influence the world in the way that you would like it influenced, and less ability to stand up and go, USA, USA, we're the best, we're the best. Because actually, no, you are just kind of handing over power. So it is like there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? So for all the time that the US has been spending more than their fair share on NATO and etc., on defense, they are getting stuff back for that, and there are returns on investments, even when it comes down to like trade relationships through, you know, that are derived from kind of soft power and hard power initiatives that are generated by the amount of money they're spending on their defense. And so I think it's really problematic to keep this idea up that Europe are just freeloaders. You know, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Anyway, back to what we were talking about, which was so I don't know if people agree or disagree with what I was saying. USA is shutting off intelligence sharing and weapon systems for a week in Ukraine. It was a cold shower preview for Europe. Trump sees Europe as the enemy and Russia as the autocratic ally. Yeah, nothing I disagree with there, Cheryl. On point, particularly on point. So yeah. Okay, now going over to Shahid drones. This is something I'm very interested in because, you know, as you know, I report on this on a daily basis, where we look at the fine details of at least what the Ukrainian general staff are claiming on a daily basis, and we have a real, you know, idea of the trend lines. In fact, it's probably a good time to just talk about those trend lines. Dell does his stats on a daily basis, and thanks, Dell, he's an absolute legend. He still does this, and I don't give him enough props. And here we are on the 17th of May, and we get to see all this data that comes out. And what we're going to look at are the drone stats. Now, of course, it's worth remembering that the drone stats are the ones that are shot down, not the ones that the total amount of drones that are sent. So actually recently the stats are probably higher because there's a bit of a downtick here, but that's partly because more drones are getting through. Actually, with the Ukrainians are shooting fewer drones down, and that makes it look like the Russians are using fewer drones, but actually it's not necessarily the case. Now, there has also been a bit of a downtick since potentially some of the manufacturing facilities might have been hit. But the idea is that the Russians have been sending more drones in. As you can see, like the steepness of the gradient steepness here indicates more drones being used on a daily basis, nightly basis. And the trend line is definitely, trending upwards. Is slightly tailed off a little bit there. As I've mentioned, I think that's partly to do with manufacturing facilities here, partly to do with a lack of success in intercepting. Okay, so what are the Russians doing that are leading to the Ukrainians struggling to shoot them down? How Russia's Shahed drones are getting more dangerous, and what Ukraine is doing about it. We've talked about this before, but let's do it again. Part of this uptick is due to limited air defense to bring down ballistic missiles. But Russia's preferred deep strike weapon, the Shahed drone, has gotten some major upgrades since the start of the year, including jet engines and Starlink satellite attachments, putting pressure on Ukraine's already strained air defense. Inbound Shahed swarms have become increasingly unpredictable and deadly in recent months. Alexei, the commander of a mobile air defense unit for the past 2 years, has guarded the northwest of Kiev from these drones, told the Kiev Independent. Russia has been sending them in larger swarms and outfitting them with jet engines, complicating the task facing air defense across the country. So more of them at any one time, going more quickly. So obviously, there's your issue. Drones launched by Russia, those shot down and lost and fell. So we've got January, February, March, April, May. We can see that February was the March was the worst month with a huge number of drones sent. And then as we went into April, something happened around there where they went down, and we also had truces and ceasefire. There was a Victory Day one, there was the other one, so that really affected the stats. So don't read too much into this lack here. The capability is not that the Ukrainians have massively overcome the drone adaptations, because actually like today was an example where almost a third of the drones, or last night almost a third of the drones got through. So they are still struggling really heavily to take these drones down at the moment. So numbers scraped from the Ukrainian Air Force's reports on Shaheds incoming, lost, and shot down also show a major uptick in their effectiveness, even as the total number of Shahed Russia sends is on the decline. 111 made it through in February compared to 404 in March and 424 in April. Meanwhile, the number of Shaheds the Air Force reported as launched dropped by about a third between March and April. The increasing effectiveness of Shaheds is largely thanks to the new jet engines, which allow the drones to fly faster, carry bigger bombs, and maintain higher altitudes. And that's another issue. The higher altitudes means that those mobile air defense teams find it more difficult to shoot them down. Alexei says most of the jet engine drones travel between 380 and 400 kilometers an hour. So that's a real improvement in the speed. The team clocked their record of a Shahed traveling at 477 kilometers per hour in the latter half of March, which they show off on a screenshot from the radar-based mobile application that all Ukrainian air defense units share. A year before, the max speed was in the neighborhood of 200 kilometers an hour. So they have over doubled the speed of these Shahed drones. It's absolutely incredible, and in a bad way. Similarly, the maximum payload that these Shaheds carry has tripled from about 30 kilograms to 90 kilograms. So they've over doubled the speed and tripled the payload. This remains a far cry from the 450 kilograms a cruise missile like the KH-101 can carry, but Russia fields far more Shaheds. The new engines also bring Shaheeds higher in the sky as needed, reaching a ceiling of around 2 kilometers. The vertical range of a Browning machine gun, like the one that Alexei shoots, is, he says, more like 1,800 meters. So he just can't reach them. Shoulder-mounted surface-to-air missiles like the Soviet Igla and American Stingers work at higher ranges, but are in shorter supply. Russia does, however, face some limits in adding jet engines to Shaheeds. They are more expensive than the two-stroke piston engines, replicas of the US-made MD-550 that Shahed started out the war with. Russia often has to import jet engine technology, sometimes the Western components delivered through third parties to get around sanctions. About half the Shaheeds that radar picks up coming into Ukraine are dummy ones. So that's an interesting stat. Half of them are dummies. So when we are, I mean, I'm worried, last night, no, actually, last night's probably a bad example. But, when you're getting 160 odd drones getting sent in and you're thinking, goodness me, so many of them are getting through. Well, if half of them are dummy, like I never quite know with the stats whether the ones that are dummy are included in the ones that are kind of shot down or intercepted, and the ones that get through are all like non-dummy ones, or whether the ones that say 30 get through, whether 15 of them therefore are dummy ones and they're not to worry about. I don't know the answer to that. But these dummy ones have no warheads and generally cheaper, and their job is to distract enemy fire. Many of those show up on the data as lost or fell. So that the answer there is that then most of these are lost or fell. So actually, if you've got 30 getting through, then it's not going to be 50% of them are dummies. The actual material of this typical Shahed, so that's good. I've learned something. The actual material of this typical Shahed is remarkably flimsy relative to what one would imagine of a weapon of war. Water condenses with the cold further up in the atmosphere, which has typically weakened the Shahed's structure. The team says the Shaheds are getting a new coating that makes them more resistant to the moisture they run into higher up. Russia also frequently flies Shaheds low, which is dangerous because while they're easier to hit, they're harder to detect. Land-based radar signals, the core of Ukrainian identification, don't return good location data on Shaheds flying low below the horizon. Indeed, the team's radars picked up the 477 kilometer per hour Shahed at 300 meters above ground. Some glide as low as 100 meters, giving satellites and mobile teams a tiny window of time in which to spot and shoot them. So imagine you've got a drone up here, right? Really high up. If you're down here, you've got like a cone going up like that. You can see more of the sky there. But as you're coming further down, that cone is much smaller. So, if a drone's coming into your cone up here, you've got all this time to spot and acquire the target because the cone goes up like that and it's traveling a long time through that wider end of the cone. If it's flying through the cone right down here, you've only got a tiny window to acquire the target and lock on, and et cetera, et cetera. That's how I understand it, but that's just common sense. I don't know if I technically know what I'm talking about. I clearly probably don't. So, indeed, the team's radars, yes. So, yeah, that's what we've done. At lower altitudes, we have something like 5 or 6 seconds to work when we need to find a target, target and destroy them. More over the horizon radar would, he said, go a long way for groups like theirs. The Shaheds have historically also run fairly robotically along pre-planned flight paths. Now, some are avoiding spotlights, like the one that one team member of the unit, Svita, uses to spot in the sky. Light avoidance could be new programming added to Shahed visual guidance, Alexei explained. Their dependence on visual guidance, however, meant that Shaheds clung to familiar routes for most of the time they'd been flying over Ukraine. Quote, they used to lay out a route for the Shahed and it would go right along the route. It was simple to destroy them. At the moment, they react to light. That is, if you turn on a flashlight, they start making maneuvers, he said. Those on the way to Kiev often stuck to the Dnipro River over or the sleek new Odessan highway. That is the main thoroughfare southward to the Black Sea and the titular town, Ukraine's second largest. That also seems to have changed recently. Quote, a few of them are actively guided. That is, they are being steered online. They film our positions, see us and record us. So later they try to fly around us. The coordinator for a number of these regional mobile defense units specified to the Kyiv Independent that some of the Shaheds are also flying with Starlink terminals that keep them connected to pilots in Russia in flight. So what are the Ukrainians doing? Well, Ukraine's mobile defense teams have also gotten far better at shooting down drones over the past 2 years. They've managed to shoot down six Shahids flying through their little quadrant of the Ukrainian sky during March. The team's central tool is a truck-mounted Browning machine gun. A major upgrade over the past 2 years has been the distribution of thermal vision across the front line, which can work in times when Svita's spotlight cannot. The actual hardware many use is not that complicated, certainly not compared to what the air defense groups aiming for cruise missile or ballistic missiles use. But these air defense teams have to work in close coordination across the entire country because Russia combines its attacks of drones and missiles and faint fake-offs and launches of various MiG airplanes from airfields within range of Ukraine. But Ukraine's air defense communications are leaps and bounds ahead of where they were in 2022. Applications like Visage, developed just before the full-scale invasion, have radically improved their ability to track incoming air targets. They're also integrated with the Ukrainian Armed Forces' ubiquitous Delta mapping and communications applications. So that's the Delta I was talking about earlier. Even the thermal vision targeting and shooting are linked via a tablet application. These days, mobile air groups around the country effectively share screens on the application live. Alexei shows off a grayscale but high-resolution hit from another team in Chernihiv Oblast, firing on a Shahid that erupts into red flames. Looks good, right? Like something out of the movies, he said. And there you go. So there's a little insight into the challenges, travails of the Ukrainians against these Shahids, which are adapting to the challenges or adapting to the environment there. So lots of people making comments about these drones. We have JR who's in the zone. Where are you? You were just talking about this. I think I've missed it now. Ah, here it is. So JR says they count the ones that don't have a payload. I wonder what the percentage is of hits on empty missiles versus hits on those with a payload. Yeah, I'd love to know the breakdown. I'd love to, obviously you'd love to know all the details of these things that, I've not been hearing at all of what has been hit in Ukraine over the last few nights. And that I don't like that. It sounds horrible, but I prefer to see like civilian infrastructure being hit, as long as there are no deaths, right? That's horrible. But if they're hitting civilian infrastructure, then they're not hitting. And I'm talking about this not in human terms, not in psychological terms, not in emotive terms, but in purely military terms, right? If you are in charge of the armed forces of Ukraine, you do not want your air defense systems, your defense factories to be hit. And if they're hitting apartment blocks, then they're not hitting that really high military value targets, as terrible as that is. So when I don't hear of anything being hit, then I just think that those military targets are probably being hit. Because they're keeping really quiet about it. They're thinking, right, there are 30 drones that got through last night and we haven't heard about them hitting anywhere, then I always think the worst. And yeah, there you go. Right. Okay. So let's see what you guys have to say. Just a few thanks to you guys. Michael Vujar, thank you very much. Always good to have you on board. Thanks for the ATP Geopolitics memberships. Really, really kind. We have Axel Pro. Sorry, mate. Trump MTF. I don't know what MTF means. I think I agree. Thanks, Axel Pro. Really appreciate that. We have JJ saying, unless Eurovision includes Sleaford Mods, Baxter Duty, or Billy No Mates, I will pass. Love from Texas. There you go. I don't think they will, but hope springs eternal for you, I guess. Thank you very much, JJ. Really appreciate that. Julian Rosser, that's insanely generous of you, gifting 20 ATP Geopolitics memberships. Thank you, my good man. That's really, really kind. And Kevin Forst following up with a Swift 5 as well. So thank you, mate. Really generous from all of you. Dylan Thomas, thanks, mate. Super sticker. Good to have you on board again, Dylan. Appreciated. Really is. Right. I don't know if you guys have any questions for me. Please throw them in, or any talking points that we want to go through. Little Whiskey Shop, I just want to say, Mark, thank you. Everyone should check out the little whiskey shop in Stockbridge and get themselves some white port. This is delicious. I mean, I don't know what you're saying there. I just want to say thank you, Mark. Okay, right. What else do we have to say? I guess I could go to look at, in fact, if I move my screens, move my browsers and whatnot, in the event of a lack of questions, let's just have a little look at this. So I don't know what the latest is with the peace negotiations and what have you, but the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio said Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister for Russia, told me that Moscow will prepare a document outlining its demands for a ceasefire in Ukraine. The Ukrainian side will work on its own ceasefire proposal, and we hope to present it soon. If the documents from each side contain realistic ideas, we will make progress. Otherwise, we will have a different assessment. There are other issues that we will need to resolve, and we do not want to continue endless negotiations on Ukraine. We have asked the Senate to give us some time to see if we can make progress in negotiations on Ukraine. I mean, this is all absolutely enraging for me. The Senate will take steps to pass a bill on sanctions against Russia if progress is not made. It's the whole, we need more time if progress isn't made. How long? Like, no progress has been made, right? You had a ceasefire that was demanded by yourselves as well. That was not agreed to. You've had negotiations, in-person negotiations, where Putin didn't go and nothing got agreed there. Like, where do you draw the line and say, no, we're now going to hit you, Russia, with sanctions? What you're saying is, yeah, we'll make sure there's some sanctions ready and Congress is going to pass that. But, you know, we're essentially going to kick it into long weeds and just hope some nebulous point in the future that something can be agreed. It's so infuriating. We have told the Russians that Congress will pass a bill on sanctions if there is no progress in the negotiations on Ukraine. What, in like 2029? Congress passing sanctions legislation against Russia is something we cannot stop or control. Okay, but what you can control is getting heavy on Russia now. Like now. Honestly, it just infuriates me that the US is bending over backwards not to come down heavy on Russia. Just, you know, and you just think the worst. You really do. But there you go. Results are in for Eurovision. Was someone joking about the UK? Oh, must have been early. Final results. Yep, Austria, Israel, Estonia, Sweden, Italy. So there you go. UK were down in 19th place, so I don't think we were fighting out for anything there. Ukraine came in the Eurovision in 9th place. I did vote for Ukraine a few times. I have to be honest with you. But there you go. Any questions? There is some doctrine of non-assassination that preserves heads of state, but if Russia hit Soldier Max, nephew of a delegate to Turkey peace talks, then what should Trump admin say? Right. Okay. Just to explain what's gone on here, what happened in the negotiations, one of the Russians said, you know, if you don't sort something out soon, I'm probably butchering what was said, but it's something along like, it was a threat saying, you know, if you don't sort things out soon, then more of your relatives will die. And then one of the people at the negotiations, that one of the Ukrainian delegation, their nephew has just been killed, which is kind of like very pointed. But he's come out and said that this doesn't make us want to capitulate to you more. It makes us stronger in our resolve. But I'm not quite sure. Yeah. So what would the Trump admin say to this? I mean, the Trump administration doesn't say anything to some of the most horrific things. Like even when the Sumy strike that killed all those people in that kind of trolley bus in the middle of Sumy, somewhat recently, you know, they came out with they tried not to blame Russia. You know, oh, I heard it was a mistake, said Trump, and you know, trying to give excuses for Russia. And you had the minivan this morning in Sumy where 9 people were killed. Like that was a minibus that was targeted by the Russians. They had recon on the minibus, and they then hit it with another drone. So they knew that was an evacuation bus. They knew it had civilians in, and they killed those civilians. Meanwhile, the Trump administration do jack all. Russia can get away with committing atrocity after atrocity, and there appears to be absolutely no comeuppance for them. And so I think we have to. Sorry, I don't mean to be laughing at that. Super serious stuff that we're talking about, but yeah, we're going to have to get to this position. I think this week. I really hope that the Europeans. I know Bertold in the thread keeps telling me, look, Friedrich Merz has said there are going to be sanctions from Germany from Tuesday onwards. That's the indication. And I hope that's true. I hope that the Europeans go, screw you, the United States. You're on your own. We are going to sanction the crap out of Russia, and you can join us if you want, or you can be morally bankrupt. And I hope that the Europeans just find the balls to actually kind of stand up and lead by example. I really, really hope that. So yeah, a little whiskey shot, Mark. Cheers, mate, for the next bottle of Mother's Port. This is I don't mind if it will go to that, Mark. Thank you for subsidizing my own orders from your very good self. You're an absolute legend, and it really is a nice port. Thank you, mate. Yeah. This is such a succinct synopsis of, I think, Europe, and actually you can include the US and everyone apart from Russia and Ukraine. We're really shit at getting ready for war. Yeah, I think that kind of says it all. Yeah. So there you go. Just trying to see if there are any other questions from you guys in the live chat that are worthy of some time. Yeah, I'm not sure. So Gen Consensus, I'm never quite sure what to make about these claims, because you hear very often from Ukrainian military sources that the Russians are getting ready for an offensive in Zaporizhia area and the eastern front line. They're going to go for Dnipropetrovsk, which I think is probably quite likely, that last one. But then you hear claims that they are not sending all of their mobilized troops or their recruited troops to Ukraine. Actually, they're keeping some back, and that and that also includes material that they're building, that they're not sending it all down to Ukraine. You're thinking, okay, is that true? And if it is true, why? What is the rationale for building up forces and material elsewhere? Media reports Russia massing forces near Finland, says Gen Consensus. Later, they said it was 2,000 troops and facilities for 50 vehicles. How is that mass? And then there you go. So, is it that what they're actually doing is just reconstituting forces that have been drastically minimized? So right throughout the war, we've known that air defense units have been drafted away from the Finnish border, from the Chinese border, and moved to Ukraine. And at some point, I'm sure troops have gone from there as well. And it could just be that they're actually reconstituting some of those lost forces, and it's nothing really to worry about. Even you don't know whether these are just kind of crappy rumors that they're actually, coming from rubbish sources, or whether these are true and they're coming from decent sources, or whether it's psyop. So Ukrainians might have some reason to inflate the threat of the Russians in certain areas. Earlier on in the war, there were often these claims going around that Ukraine would claim things were like they'd really be emotively leaning to how bad things were, because if you think things are really, really dire, then you're more likely to throw more support towards Ukraine, and that's exactly what they needed. That's not to say that's disingenuous. That's just like gaming the system and sensibly, trying to get as much aid and assistance as they possibly could. So, yeah, I'm never quite sure what to make of even Ukrainian military claims to Russian forces massing in, left, right, and center. Okay, a few super chats coming in. Thank you very much for that, by the way. So thank you, Mark from Little Whiskey Shop again. Putin puppet. It might be very simple. Trump likes Ukraine and later entire Europe under Putin's and Xi's control ASAP in exchange for Trump's annexation of Greenland, Canada, Mexico, and Panama. And this gets on to, and thanks very much, Putin puppet, by the way. This gets on to the theory that Trump, and when I say Trump, I don't always just mean him, because I don't think he has a capacity to think in these large strategic ways, to be honest. I really don't. And I think there are people around him that do. And I think there are some really quite horrible and malignant, dangerous people that are drafting his policies and whispering the grime of worm tongue in King Theoden's ear. They are whispering evils, and he goes and does stuff. And if it appeals to his sense of strong man leader, he keeps saying, I'm the only guy that can solve this. Like, the reason why Putin didn't turn up because I wasn't there, and it's all about me. And it actually, he was interviewed by Brett Baer the other night on Fox News, and one of his answers was so. Brett Baer was even like, yeah, but we're talking about Russia here, like trying to get him back onto, like, stop talking about yourself, stop derailing this to, like, bang on about how much money that you've made out of going to the Middle East. Like, we're talking about, the question is about, what pressure you're putting on Russia. And so, Trump has a simplistic, I think, understanding of things that allows him to be manipulated by the people around him who have much bigger ideas, much more refined ideologies, as horrible as those ideologies might be. And one of the ideologies appears to be, or it could well be, this sense of empires, whereby Europe is to be carved up between kind of Russia, China, and the US. And it could be that the US says, okay, we're going to pull out from Europe, and you can have a go at Europe, Russia, because actually we don't like the EU. We don't like this international organization in this kind of zero-sum game world of transactional politics, where everyone's a competitor. They aren't allies, and these guys form this great trading bloc that could challenge US hegemony. So we'd rather actually see Russia undermine the EU. And so we have, and the Heritage Foundation, by the way, that wrote Project 2025, which is a blueprint for the Trump administration and what they're doing. That 900-page book, they told you what they're doing, and they're doing it. They have also been having kind of forum groups and whatnot on what they can do to get rid of the EU. And so both the US and Russia want to destroy the EU, to break that unity and to turn it into individual countries, because they don't have the strength individually that they do collectively. There is something, the sum is greater than all of its parts. So when you bring all of those nations together in the EU, they become a formidable force. Yes, it's difficult trying to herd cats and trying to get unanimous decisions out of 27 member states. But, when they do decide, there's a lot of force, there's a lot of economic power there. And I think, Trump likes Ukraine and later the entire Europe to be under Putin's and Xi's control. Or more likely, he not necessarily under their control, but broken apart. And Russia can have a go at these states at the side of Europe. And as long as Europe is weak, then the US wins. They don't see Europe as an ally. And this is, like I've told you before, again, I refer to books where this is laid out. Madeleine Albright laid out in her book Fascism, where she has a whole chapter on Trump and talks about how he doesn't understand alliances in the world. He only understands transactional zero-sum game politics and positive-sum games where both sides can benefit from working together. You know, that's why you have NATO. That's why you have the EU. He doesn't understand that. It's not in his worldview. He doesn't compute with Trump's understanding of how you should go about doing politics, because he sees politics as an extension of like the reality of being a real estate mogul in New York, where you don't have alliances, you're just all fighting against each other to kind of accumulate as much property as possible. And for him, Greenland and Panama and Canada are all part of that kind of understanding, which is like, you know, we're not going to work with Canada, we're going to own Canada. So it's like Trump, you know, as a real estate mogul, you don't go, oh, I'm going to work with this other real estate mogul. You're going to say, well, it's me against. It's like, you know, he's a competitor, so I need to buy him out. I'm not going to work with him. I'm going to freaking buy him out, and then I'll be in control of everything. So it's like, I'm going to buy Greenland. I'm going to buy Canada. I'm going to buy Panama. I'm going to control these, or militarily or economically coerce these nations to be part of a greater American empire that then, you know, controls that you know, Northwestern Passage area. And so, you know, with global warming causing a recession of the ice up there, then you're going to have free movement of maritime traffic to a much greater degree, and that becomes a security issue. And actually, if we control all of Canada and Greenland, then sorted, and then we can have their rare earth minerals, etc., etc. So yeah, that's my long-winded non-answer to your stimulus there. So thank you, Putin Puppet. Bobo Uzala, thank you again. When will you live stream with Silicon Curtain and Greg Terry? So Jonathan Fink is in Ukraine at the moment, and Greg Terry's traveling around, I think, quite a bit in the US. So it's not been easy we were going to try and do one earlier this week, but it couldn't quite come about. But hopefully soon, mate. Hopefully soon. It will happen. It's just, yeah, people's calendars are not aligning. Stars are not aligning. Putin Puppet again. But thank you, Bobo. Even later entire, so this is carrying on from the last point. Even later, entire South America, US won't follow Article 5 any longer, so it's factually not anymore in NATO. Only now to play and dismantle it. She is allowed to have Taiwan, Japan, and South Korea. Again, could well be. I mean, yeah. What Trump or his administration's true view of NATO is, I don't know. Like, doesn't like alliances, right? So NATO straight away isn't something I think that naturally appeals to Trump. The idea is that why would we need an alliance like that if we are the big, we are the number one on the world stage? We don't need alliances. Like the smaller nations, I guess the way he would see it is the smaller nations need alliances as an insurance policy, because they can't, you know, unilaterally defend themselves against bigger threats. So, you know, if Portugal's attacked by Russia, you know, they're in trouble. So they need to be part of NATO, and et cetera, et cetera. So, but if the US was attacked by Russia, yeah, we're beaten back. It's not a problem. But actually, those countries do add so much to the US's capabilities by working together. You know, the combined armed forces of NATO is formidable. But I think, you know, unless you get into the weeds of really understanding NATO and understanding what the military capabilities of NATO are and how they are spread amongst all those forces, and yes, the US has massive armed forces and a great capability that many other NATO nations don't, there is still a really valuable, there's a lot of value in working as an alliance together. And I just don't think Trump really understands that. So, like, does he really want there to be the end of NATO? I mean, there are a lot of people in the MAGA sphere who seem to hate NATO, seem to be anti-NATO. They're almost taking on that old kind of left-wing position that is part of kind of US military imperialism, but it's coming from this right-wing isolationist, I think, positioning, and I think there's definitely an element of that within the MAGA ecosystem, and yeah. So whether Marco Rubio was quite clever a couple of years ago, he saw this coming, and before, when he was a bit more sound than he is now, he's just completely capitulating to Trump's rhetoric and demands and desires at the moment. And so, like, he's just a husk of the politician he used to be. Not that he was ever a great politician, but Marco Rubio, that there was he put in this bill that meant that Trump couldn't unilaterally pull out of NATO, and that then meant that that Congress would have to pass that. So Trump's got two options, which is to kind of just completely tear down the fabric of US politics, which he seems to be doing, and kind of like denuding Congress the ability to have any kind of power. He's doing everything by executive order and doing things unilaterally himself. So the executive unified executive theory, where he's just trying to condense all the power in him as the president and take it away from Congress, and so he becomes more like a dictator essentially. And one of the ways he does that is by saying, and I was talking about this morning, this is the breaking news bit I did this morning on the development of the peace negotiations is super important. You haven't watched that already. It's the last bit that I find where I was trying to join the dots here. So as part of this approach to the kind of unified executive theory and doing everything by executive order and having the power to make decisions himself, he needs to have the situation whereby there's a national emergency. So he keeps, you've got an economic emergency, and then you've got the Tren de Aragua, this Venezuelan gang that he's claiming is invading the US, and it's been directed by the Venezuelan government. And that then allows him to say it's an emergency and pull out the Illegal Aliens Enemies Act, or whatever it is, of 1798 or whatever. That means he can just essentially take people off the streets and deport them without due process. But this is all part of condensing power into the single person at the top. And then the joining the dots part comes with the Tulsi Gabbard as Director of National Intelligence, in charge of 18 different intelligence agencies and departments, who is pro-Russia, pro-Bashar al-Assad. She's then, her intelligence, National Security Council, NIC people have been generating a report to see whether Venezuela really are directing Tren de Aragua, this gang, to infiltrate the US on the behest of the Venezuelan government. And they, compiled all the evidence, and they've said, no, that's not what's happening. So actually, therefore, you don't have the right to call this a national emergency, and therefore you don't have the right to kind of bring into play the Illegal Enemies Act, whatever it's called. And of course, the truth of the report of the intelligence agency, what the NIC or whatever it is there, was really uncomfortable for the DNI, for Tulsi Gabbard and the Trump administration. So rather than say, oh, we don't seem to have permission to do what we're doing, we need to change our policy, she just fired those people. So the two people that generated the report, the truthful, objectively true report, I would argue, because they don't align, that the report doesn't align ideologically with her and by extension the Trump administration, she fires them. So then you've got this issue where the intelligence agencies are now being told very clearly that if you produce reports or kind of evidence that doesn't align with the ideology of the Trump administration, then you will be fired. So now you're going to get this understanding that, well, the Trump administration wants this to be true, so we are going to generate a report that supports that being true, even though we know it's not true. When you've got intelligence agencies doing that, then you've got an ideological dictatorship. And so I really worry for Ukraine, because you've got a clear anti-Ukraine, pro-Russian stance from Tulsi Gabbard at the head of the DNI, from all sorts of people in the Trump administration and adjacent to the Trump administration. And you're going to start getting pressure on the DOD, the CIA, the FBI, the national security agencies, and this and that, starting to generate pro-Russian reports, because if they don't, they're going to get sacked. And then you've got an alignment of the United States with Russia, just administratively and through the entire structure of government. And that is absolutely I'm horrified by that potential, but I'm also really scared that it really is happening. So when you hear these stories like, oh, she's fired them, don't just go, oh, that doesn't matter, it's just a random story and whatever. What we need to be questioning, what's going on there, and how can we connect that to, or how should we connect that? Like, are there connections there? And what does this tell us about what's going on over here? And are these things connected? And invariably, sadly, they are connected. And it's deeply, deeply worrying that that which is what accuracy and truth appear to be. Truth is the first casualty of war. Well, I think there's a war on American democracy, and truth is definitely the first casualty. Mark from Little Whiskey Shop. JP, at least I now know what to bring on our next road trip. Stack the 900-pound bottle of whiskey in the hip flask. A bottle of Martha next trip. Yeah, she does a good white port. Yeah, you're absolutely right, mate. So there you go. Anyway, I've been wittering on and have no idea what's been going on in this is where I should have hit JR, said, come on the back end and help me see what people have been talking about. It's probably a bit late now. I've been wittering on for almost 2 hours, so I should probably get off here now. Look, in case there are if there are any other questions, get them in while I am still here, as I have a couple of sips of white port left. Oh, so smooth, so good. Yes, so I am worried about the US positioning with regard to Ukraine. Of course I am. I can't stop worrying about that. You hear me bang on about it every single day. And yeah, really, really worried about that. And I hope that Europe need to wake up, as indeed Mark says. Europe need to wake up and change NATO to Kaito and bin the USA. I think there. I think you can build a case for that for sure. You know me too well. I bet you $10 is a false ending. My goodbyes are usually like half an hour long, because someone asks an annoyingly good question, and then I have to go off on a tangent for another 20 minutes. Yeah, you're quite right there, Ed. Damn it. One day I'm just going to go bye and just turn it off, just out of nowhere, and just say bye and end it. He'll be like deeply, deeply upset that I haven't had a 45-minute goodbye. Anyway, I probably will say goodbye though, as there are no questions coming in. But tomorrow I am going to make sure I get out a geopolitics video tomorrow, because there's quite a bit to say on that, and I do want to do my American politics video, because I've got like 8,000 tabs to discuss with you. Just stop taking a mickey, guys. Anyway, in the meantime, guys, thank you very much for being a part of this live stream. Hopefully it's been informative, and we've had a nice little chat together, and you've had some good times in the live stream that I've probably not been able to see. It looks like there's some pretty decent commenting going on there. Don't forget to, if you haven't already, head over to the Kiev Post YouTube channel. Remember that the interview I did with them, I think, has been problematically, as much as I love the Kiev Post and love being interviewed, and Jason J Smart, who interviewed me, is a lovely guy. In fact, I was on the Zoom call with him for like an hour afterwards chatting. But the title and the original thumbnail, and actually the replacement thumbnail, isn't quite what I said. So, you know, Russia is losing ground is nothing I said in that video, and so the trolls have actually kind of got a right to go and have a right old pop at that. But there you go. Dude, Mitch, thank you so much. And hopefully, you know, Mitch sent me some like logo ideas, and hopefully going to get them uploaded on like some mugs and things. Benny Pie's helping me just upload stuff for merchandise. I'm not one to kind of like spam you with please buy my jumpers and stuff, because, you know, whatever, do whatever. But here's a nice ATP Geopolitics. This is one of my favorite thin hoodie. I love this. And there's merch you can buy, link below if you want. But, you know, there you go. Thank you, Mitch. And I really appreciate you. You're a good man, all the way from Canada. Anyway, take care, guys. I will speak to you soon. I really appreciate all of the wonderful, wonderful super chats and support that you've given to the channel. Thank you to Bobo, Zala, Putin, Puppet, Little Whiskey Shop, Kevin Force, Julian Rossiter, huge thanks. JJ, Axel Pro, Michael Viewchar, Kevin Force, of course, Mark from Little Whiskey Shop, Mitch Mazarol. All of you are awesome. And if I've forgotten any of you, Daryl Thomas, of course, there you go. You are absolutely brilliant. Take care, and I will speak to you soon.